My granddaughter looked me dead in the eyes on Christmas morning and said, "Grandma, Mom says you're just visiting, so don't get comfortable. This is our house now." She was 9 years old. The words came out so smooth, so rehearsed, that I knew exactly who'd put them there. I smiled, set down the gift I brought her, and walked out of the house I paid the down payment on. 3 weeks later, my son-in-law was screaming at me through his car window in the Walgreens parking lot. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hello, friends. It's Hannah here. Thank you for being with me today. If you'd be so kind, please give this video a like and stay with me until the end. And tell me where you're listening from. I love picturing all of you out there. Now let me tell you what happened to me last Christmas and the 8 months after, and how I went from being a woman who slept with her phone on the pillow waiting for her daughter to call to a woman who sleeps just fine. Thank you. My name is Hannah. I'm 67 years old. I was widowed 4 years ago when my husband Daniel collapsed in the driveway shoveling snow. The paramedic said his heart had probably been struggling for years, and he never told me. That was Daniel. Carried everything quietly, set it down at the right moment, walked off. I miss him every single morning. The coffee pot in our kitchen still has 2 mugs next to it because I can't bring myself to move the second one. Daniel and I had one child. A daughter. I'll call her my daughter because I'm not in the habit of saying her name out loud anymore. She was 41 when this all happened. Married 11 years to a man I'll call my son-in-law, who works in commercial real estate and has the kind of competence that comes from never being told no. They have 2 children, my grandson, who's 6, and my granddaughter, who turned 9 in November. When Daniel died, he left me comfortable. Not rich. Comfortable. The house in Naperville was paid off. There was a life insurance policy. There were the savings we'd built over 43 years of him being a structural engineer and me being a school counselor for the Indian Prairie District. After taxes, after the funeral, after all of it, I had a little over $600,000 in liquid assets and the house, which Daniel and I had bought in 1987 and which Zillow now thinks is worth around $420,000. I tell you the numbers because they matter. They mattered to other people more than they mattered to me, and I didn't realize that for a long time. 2 years ago, my daughter and son-in-law found a house they loved in Glen Ellen, bigger than what they had. Backyard, finished basement, the works. The catch was the down payment. They were short. They asked me. I said yes before they finished asking. I gave them $85,000 and I called it a gift, not a loan, because what kind of mother charges interest on her own child? My daughter cried on the phone. She said, "Mom, we'll have you over every Sunday. The kids will grow up with you in their lives." I believed her. I had no reason not to. For about 6 months, that's what happened. Sunday dinners. I'd bring a casserole. My granddaughter would show me her drawings. My grandson would fall asleep on my lap during whatever cartoon was on. I'd drive home at 9 and feel like a person again, like Daniel hadn't taken every good thing with him when he went. Then it started thinning out. I won't pretend I noticed all at once. It was a Sunday canceled here. Of the kids have a thing there. Then it was me calling and getting voicemail and not getting called back until Tuesday. Then it was me suggesting brunch and being told brunch was hard because of the kids' schedules, even though both kids were in school full-time by then. I'd hang up after these conversations and stand in my kitchen and try to remember what I'd said wrong. I sent gifts. I sent a Roomba when she mentioned the new house was hard to keep clean. I paid for a week of summer camp for both grandkids when my son-in-law lost a deal and money was tight. Last spring, when their HVAC system went, I wrote a check for $12,000 without being asked, because I overheard my daughter on speakerphone telling someone they didn't know how they were going to manage. She thanked me with a text with a heart emoji. I want to be honest about something. I knew on some level what was happening. A school counselor for 31 years learns to read a pattern. I just couldn't make myself look directly at it. Because if I looked at it directly, I'd have to do something about it, and doing something about it meant accepting that the only family I had left was treating me like a vending machine. The Christmas thing started in early November. My daughter called, which should have been my first morning, and said they'd love to host me for Christmas. Full week, why didn't I come up on the 22nd and stay through the 28th? I was thrilled. I bought a tree for their living room because she mentioned theirs had broken in storage. I bought wrapped gifts for every person in that house, including stocking stuffers I started picking up in October like a fool in love. I drove up on the 22nd with my Subaru packed to the windows. My daughter answered the door in workout clothes and said, "Oh, you're early." I was not early. I was 10 minutes late. The house was beautiful. They decorated it like a magazine. My son-in-law was in his office on a call and didn't come out to greet me. My grandkids were on iPads in the basement playroom and barely looked up when I came down. I told myself, everyone's tired. It's a stressful week. Give them grace. For 3 days, I gave them grace. I cooked. I cleaned up after dinners. I'd cooked. I drove my granddaughter to a friend's birthday party because my daughter had a Pilates class. I sat in the guest room at night listening to them laugh downstairs at things I wasn't invited into, and I told myself this was just how families are now, busy, distracted, and I should be grateful to be in the same building. Christmas morning, I came down at 7 because I always made cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. That was Daniel's tradition. Pillsbury, from the can, no shame. I had the oven preheating when my granddaughter came into the kitchen in her pajamas, blonde hair messy, holding her stuffed rabbit. She looked at me like she was working up to something. She'd been coached. I knew it before she opened her mouth. She said, "Grandma, Mom says you're just visiting, so don't, get too comfortable. This is our house now." Mom said I should tell you because you keep moving stuff. I asked her very gently what stuff I'd moved. She said, "The salt thing and the towels in the bathroom. Mom says you keep acting like you live here." I had moved the salt cellar 1 inch to the left to make room for a baking sheet. I had refolded a hand towel that was bunched up on the floor. I knelt down to her level. I told her thank you for telling me and that none of this was her fault and that I loved her very much and that Grandma was going to head home a little early, but she would always, always be her grandma. She started to cry a little because she's a child and children know when something's wrong, even when they're the ones being used to deliver it. I hugged her. I kissed the top of her head. I went upstairs. I packed my suitcase in 14 minutes. I left the wrapped gifts under the tree. I left the cinnamon rolls on the counter, unbaked, in the tube. I wrote nothing. I said nothing. I walked past my daughter, who was just coming down the stairs in her robe, and she said, "Mom, what are you doing?" And I said, "Heading out, sweetheart. Merry Christmas," in the same voice I used to use when parents called the school to complain about their kid's grade. Flat, professional, done. She followed me to the driveway in her slippers. She said, "Mom, come on, don't be dramatic." That word, dramatic. I want you to remember she used that word, because it's going to come back. I drove the 4 hours home in silence. I didn't cry until I pulled into my own driveway and saw the wreath I'd hung on my own door. Then I cried for about 20 minutes in the car, the kind of crying where you make sounds you didn't know you could make. Then I went inside, washed my face, made myself a piece of toast because I'd forgotten to eat, and I called a woman named Teresa Whitaker. Teresa was the estate attorney Daniel and I had used to draw up our wills back in 2014. She was 60-something, sharp, and she'd told me at Daniel's funeral, "If you ever need anything, you call me, not my receptionist." I'd never used that number. I used it that afternoon. She answered on the third ring. It was Christmas Day. She answered her own phone on Christmas Day. I told her what had happened. I told her about the $85,000 for the down payment, the $12,000 for the HVAC, the camps, the gifts, the years. I told her about the words coming out of a 9-year-old's mouth. I told her I wanted my daughter out of my will and I wanted to know what I could legally protect for the grandchildren, because the grandchildren had not done this to me. Teresa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Hannah, come to my office Tuesday. We can do this clean. And I'm sorry. I'm just so sorry. I'm just so sorry." That was the first time I cried about something other than missing Daniel since the funeral, because she said it like she meant it, and I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to mean it. Tuesday morning, I sat in Teresa's office for 3 hours. We went through everything: the house, the investment accounts, the life insurance policy that I had renewed in my own name after Daniel died, with my daughter as the sole beneficiary. We changed all of it. The house and the bulk of the liquid assets, about $500,000, went into a trust, not for my daughter, for my 2 grandchildren, equally split, with a corporate trustee, not their parents, as administrator. The kids could access education funds with documentation starting now, and the remainder would unlock when each of them turned 25. My daughter's name appeared in the document exactly twice, both times in a clause explicitly excluding her from any inheritance, with language stating she'd been provided for during my lifetime and would receive nothing further. The life insurance policy. That one was harder. $250,000. Teresa asked me where I wanted it to go. I sat there for a long time. I thought about Daniel. I thought about what he'd want, and I said, Children's Memorial, Lurie's, the pediatric oncology unit. He spent the last 6 months of his life reading to a little boy in that unit through a volunteer program. They sent flowers to his funeral. Teresa wrote it down. She didn't say anything for a minute. Then she said, He'd like that, Hannah. I signed everything. 2 witnesses, a notary, the whole production, 43 years of marriage and 1 daughter, and 3 afternoons of paperwork to undo the financial assumption of an entire life. I drove home and I felt, and I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds, I felt peaceful. Not happy, not vindicated, peaceful. Like I'd taken a breath I'd been holding since the cinnamon rolls. For about a week, I heard nothing from my daughter. Not a call, not a text, not an email. She knew she'd done something. She was waiting to see if I'd come crawling back the way I always had. I didn't. On January 4th, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Listened to the message. It was the artificial sweet voice I now recognized as her ask for something voice. She said, Mom, hey, I think there was some kind of misunderstanding over Christmas. And also, completely separately, I wanted to talk to you about something. Brad's been thinking about going in on a property with a partner, and we were hoping you could help us out short-term, just a bridge loan. We'd pay you back by summer. I'm not using their real names, by the way. I'm calling him Brad in this telling because that was the name of a boy in 4th grade who once pushed me off the merry-go-round and laughed. It feels appropriate. I deleted the voicemail. I did not call her back. She called again that night, and the next morning, and the morning after that. By Friday, she'd sent 4 texts, each one escalating. The 4th one said, Mom, this is ridiculous. You're being so dramatic. Brad needs to know by Monday. There was that word again. I texted her back once. I said, I won't be lending you any more money. Not now, not ever. Please don't ask again. She called immediately. I sent it to voicemail. The message she left this time was not the sweet voice. The message she left this time was, Are you serious right now? Over a stupid comment a 9-year-old made, you're really doing this? After everything we've done for you? After everything we've done for me. I played that line back 3 times to make sure I'd heard it right. Everything they'd done for me. I sat with that one for a long time. She didn't call again for 2 weeks. I think she was strategizing. Then on January 19th, she showed up at my front door at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday with my grandchildren in tow. They were in their school clothes. She'd picked them up early. I watched her through the window, parking, getting them out of the SUV, fixing my granddaughter's hair before walking up the path. Using them. She was using them. I almost didn't open the door. But my grandson saw me through the window and waved, and I am a grandmother, and I opened the door. She came in like she still lived there. She'd grown up in that house. I remember she put her purse on the same hook she'd put her backpack on in middle school. The kids ran to the living room where I'd kept their toys. She sat down at my kitchen table and said, Okay, Mom, let's talk like adults. Like adults. I'm 67. I am the adult. She apologized. Sort of. She said she was sorry I'd felt hurt at Christmas. She said the situation with my granddaughter got out of context. She said Brad had been stressed about work and she'd been stressed about Brad and things spilled over. She said she missed me and the kids missed me and could we please put this behind us and move forward. I let her talk. I poured her coffee. I did not say a word. When she ran out of script, she said, And Mom, I have to ask, did you really change your will? There it was, the whole reason for the visit. The kids were the prop. The will was the show. I said, Who told you that? She said, It doesn't matter who told me. Is it true? I said, It doesn't matter if it's true. It's mine to decide. Her face changed then. The apology face dropped right off. She said, "Mom, you can't be serious. That money is. Dad would never have wanted you to." I held up my hand. I said, "Don't tell me what your father would have wanted. Don't you ever in your life tell me what your father would have wanted." She started crying. Real tears, I think. "I'm still not sure." She said, "I'm your daughter." I said, "Yes, and I am your mother. And you let your child speak to me like that on Christmas morning because you wanted me out of that house, and you've wanted me out of your life for 2 years, except for the parts that involve checks. I know what I am to you. I finally know." She stood up. She called the kids. My grandson came running into the kitchen and hugged my legs and said, "Grandma, are we leaving already?" I knelt down and I told him I loved him and that I would see him soon, and I meant it, because nothing I'd done in Teresa's office had cut him off. Only her. Only the one who'd earned it. My daughter said at the door, "You're going to regret this. You're going to die alone, Mom." I said, "Maybe, but I'm going to die honest, and that's more than you're going to do." She slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall in the hallway. I picked it up. It was Daniel and me on a beach in 1991. The glass had cracked right down the middle. I sat down on the hallway floor, and I cried for about an hour. Not because I was wrong. Because I was wrong. Because I was wrong. And being right about your own child is the loneliest feeling there is. The next month was the Walgreens thing. I'd gone to pick up her prescription. I came out with my little white bag, and my son-in-law was standing next to my car. He must have followed me. He must have been waiting. He was a big man, 6'3", and he stood between me and my driver's side door, and he started in. He called me selfish. He called me cruel. He called me a vindictive old woman who was punishing his wife for one bad Christmas. He said his kids were going to grow up not knowing me and it would be my fault. He said, and I remember this word for word, "You think you're some kind of saint, Hannah. You're not. You're a bitter old widow who can't stand that your daughter has her own family now." A man in a UPS uniform, 2 cars over, started walking toward us. My son-in-law saw him and stepped back. I unlocked my car. I got in. I drove home. I called Teresa. She told me to file a report with the non-emergency police line, just to have it on record. I did. The officer who came to take the statement was a young woman who couldn't have been 30. When I finished telling her what happened, she said, "Ma'am, I'm going to tell you something my own grandma told me. The right answer to people like that is no. Just no. And then you hang up. I think about that officer sometimes. I hope someone's good to her." The 3rd week of February, I found out my daughter and son-in-law had hired a lawyer, not to sue me yet, to threaten to sue me. The letter came certified. It used phrases like diminished capacity and undue influence and elder exploitation by outside parties. It said they had concerns about my mental state and the rapid changes to my estate planning following a minor family disagreement. Minor family disagreement. I called Teresa. She laughed out loud, which I'd never heard her do. She said, "Hannah, this is the weakest letter I've seen in 15 years. They have nothing. But we're going to make sure of it." She set me up with a geriatric psychiatrist named Dr. Pradhan, who did 3 hours of cognitive evaluation. He sent over a 5-page letter declaring me, in writing, of completely sound mind and judgment. Teresa filed it with the court, unsolicited, just to have it on the record. She also filed an affidavit from my financial advisor, a woman named Janice Moreland who'd been managing my account since Daniel died, stating that all of my recent decisions had been made with documented professional consultation over multiple meetings. We never went to court. They never filed. The threat letter was the whole play, and we'd answered it before they could make a move. But while all of this was happening, something else was happening too. I was changing. I joined a grief group at my church, even though Daniel had been gone 4 years, because the grief I was feeling for my daughter was a brand new grief, and I needed somewhere to put it. The woman who ran the group, Pastor Yolanda, told me on my first night, "You can grieve someone who's still alive. That's allowed here. Nobody had told me that was allowed before. I cried the whole first session and didn't apologize for it. I started taking my grandson to the Children's Museum on Saturdays, just him and me, after Teresa worked out a supervised visitation arrangement that didn't require court. My daughter and son-in-law agreed to it because they thought it might soften me. It did not soften me, but it kept me in his life and hers. My granddaughter came too, eventually, once the embarrassment of Christmas faded and she started missing me. She apologized to me. My granddaughter did, in her own little 9-year-old way, over an ice cream sundae at Oberweis. She said, "I shouldn't have said that thing about your house, Grandma." I told her that her mom had put those words in her mouth and it wasn't her fault. She nodded. I think she already knew. I took a watercolor class at the community college. I am bad at watercolors. Genuinely bad. I painted a barn and my instructor said, "That's a very brave use of green, which I'm pretty sure is teacher code for what is happening here." I laughed for the first time in months. I started having lunch every Thursday with a woman named Roxanne who'd been a school nurse at one of my old schools. We talked about everything, our kids, our husbands, our knees. She lost her son to an overdose in 2019. She told me one Thursday, "Hannah, you didn't lose your daughter. Your daughter lost you. There's a difference. Know the difference." I started sleeping through the night. In May, I flew to Charleston by myself for a long weekend. I'd never traveled alone in my life. Daniel and I had always traveled together, and after he died, I'd assumed travel was over. It was not over. I ate she crab soup at a place on Market Street, and I walked through the gardens at Magnolia Plantation, and I sat on a bench under a live oak, and I cried, but it was the good kind of crying this time, the kind that comes from being somewhere beautiful and being alive in it. In June, my son-in-law lost his job, not because of me, because of him. The commercial real estate market in the Chicago suburbs had been softening for a year, and his firm let 3 people go. He wasn't the only one, but he was one of them. I heard about it from Roxanne, whose niece works in the same building. I want to be honest, I felt a flicker of something ugly, and then I felt sad. Because he'd just made my life harder for 6 months, and his life had gotten harder all on its own, and there was no satisfaction in it, only the regular sadness of watching a man fail and knowing he'd treat his wife and children worse because of it. I heard through my granddaughter, very indirectly, that they had to put their house on the market. The one I'd helped them buy. They moved into a rental in July, a smaller place. My granddaughter told me about her new bedroom in a way that made me think she didn't mind the smaller room as much as her parents did. In August, my daughter called me. She left a voicemail. She said, "Mom, it's me. I don't really know what to say. I think I've been a really bad daughter. I don't have anything to ask for. I just wanted you to know I've been thinking about you. About Dad. About a lot of things. You don't have to call me back." I played that voicemail 4 times. I played it for Roxanne over the phone. Roxanne said, "Don't call her back yet. Let her sit in it." I let her sit in it for 9 days. Then I called her. We didn't fix anything in that phone call. I want to be clear about that. There was no movie scene, no big reconciliation. She apologized for Christmas, specifically and unprompted. She apologized for putting words in my granddaughter's mouth. She did not ask for money. She did not ask about the will. She asked if she could come over for coffee sometime. I said yes. We had coffee 3 weeks later. It was awkward and quiet, and she left after 45 minutes. We've had coffee twice more since. I don't know what we are now. I don't know what we'll ever be, but she started to look at me like I'm a person again and not a balance sheet, and that's something. The will is still the will. I haven't changed it back. I don't intend to. The trust for my grandchildren is set up. The donation to Lurie's is going to happen whether she ever calls me again or not. I told her about it, the trust part anyway, on our second coffee. She cried. She said, "I deserve that, Mom." I didn't argue. She did deserve it. Here's what I want to tell you, friends, before I let you go. I spent the first 66 years of my life believing that if I gave enough, did enough, loved hard enough, my family would love me back the same way. And for 43 of those years, with Daniel, that was true. He gave back. He showed up. He carried things quietly and set them down at the right moment. But love being mutual with one person does not mean it'll be mutual with everyone you love. Your child is a separate person. Your child is allowed to become someone you wouldn't have chosen as a friend. And you are allowed to notice that. You are allowed to act on it. You are allowed to protect what's yours. Your money, your peace, your money, your dignity from anyone who treats it like a resource. I'm not going to die alone. I'm going to die surrounded by the life I built after I stopped paying for someone else's. I have Roxanne. I have my Thursday lunches and my Tuesday grief group and my Saturday museum mornings with 2 grandchildren who are starting to know me as a real person and not just a wallet attached to a casserole dish. I have Daniel's chair by the window and his mug next to the coffee pot, and I have a barn painted in a brave shade of green hanging in my front hallway. I have me back. I didn't realize I'd lost her until I started finding her again at 67 years old in an attorney's office on a Tuesday in December. If you've been listening to this and any of it sounds familiar, if there's a person in your life who only calls you when they need something, who makes you feel small in your own skin, who uses your grandchildren or your guilt or your widowhood against you, I want you to hear me. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to change the locks on your inheritance the way you change the locks on your front door. You are allowed to grieve a child who is still alive. You are allowed to be happy after. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me your name. Tell me if the story landed somewhere true for you. I read every single one and I write a lot of you back even though my typing's slow. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you. Genuinely. It means the world that you sat with me through this. This is Hannah. I'll see you next time. If I could sit across the kitchen table from the woman I was 3 years ago, the one keeping a second mug by the coffee pot, the one writing checks she didn't have to write, the one who'd already started apologizing before anyone in the room had said anything, I would put my hand over hers and tell her this. Love that only goes one direction isn't love, it's a habit. And habits, even kind ones, can starve you to death if you let them go on long enough. Everything that happened between me and my daughter happened because of 100 small choices, hers and mine. Hers were her own. But mine, I have to own. Every time I sent money without being asked, every time I let a missed Sunday slide, every time I told myself, she's just busy, I was teaching her something. I was teaching her that I would be there no matter what she did. And a person who believes you'll be there, no matter what they do, will eventually find out what they can get away with. That's not cruelty on her part, that's physics. Behavior that gets rewarded, gets repeated. I rewarded being treated like a resource for 2 solid years before Christmas morning, and then I acted shocked when my granddaughter delivered the natural conclusion of all that rewarding in her pajamas, holding a stuffed rabbit. I don't blame myself for loving her. I blame myself for not noticing sooner that loving her had stopped meaning anything to her. There's a difference between forgiving and forgetting, and there's a bigger difference between forgiving and continuing to fund. I had blurred all of those things together for so long that I couldn't tell them apart. What changed me wasn't anger. Anger is loud and it burns out fast. What changed me was a quiet decision made on Christmas afternoon in my driveway that I was going to start telling the truth about what I was seeing. Telling the truth to Teresa in her office. Telling the truth to Roxanne over a Thursday lunch. Telling the truth to my daughter at my kitchen table when she came with the children as a prop. Telling the truth, finally, to myself, which was the hardest one. The truth was that I had taught a grown woman that my pain was an acceptable price for her comfort, and the only person who could unteach that was me. I want to leave you with the only thing I really know after 67 years on this earth. You cannot make someone love you well by loving them harder. You can only protect what's left of yourself and let the chips fall. If they come back to you as a real person, the way my daughter is slowly, awkwardly trying to do over coffees that last 45 minutes, then good. If they don't, you'll be okay. You'll be more than okay. You'll be a woman who finally found out who she was when she stopped paying to be someone else's mother. That woman has been waiting for you. Go find her. She's been patient.